Everyone knows Medusa, the woman with snakes for hair, the monster whose eyes could turn people to stone. But what if I told you she wasn't born a monster? What if one of the most famous monsters in mythology was once a young woman with a completely different story? Her name was Medusa, the monster who wasn't born a monster.
The Story Vault. Unlock the untold.
Before we begin, there's one thing worth knowing. Greek mythology wasn't written by just one person. For over 2,000 years, poets, playwrights, and historians told these stories in different ways. Sometimes the details changed. Sometimes the meaning changed. The version we're following today is the one that shaped how most people imagine Medusa, the version made famous by the Roman poet Ovid. Whether every ancient Greek would have told it this way is another story entirely. Today, if someone calls you Medusa, it's probably not a compliment. We imagine snakes, stone, a monster. But imagine hearing that name before any of those stories existed. You wouldn't picture a monster. You'd picture a young woman. According to this version of the myth, Medusa was once known for something completely different. Not fear, beauty. Some stories describe her as one of the most beautiful women in the world. People admired her, especially her hair. Long, bright, almost impossible to ignore. Ironically, the very thing people admired most would later become the thing everyone feared. Medusa served in the temple of Athena, the goddess of wisdom, strategy, and warfare. The temple wasn't just a place of worship. It was considered sacred, a place where the gods were honored, where people came seeking protection, order, and justice. For Medusa, it should have been one of the safest places in the world. Then, one day, Poseidon entered the story. The god of the sea, powerful, proud, one of the most feared gods on Mount Olympus. And what happened next depends on which ancient source you read. Some of the oldest Greek texts simply describe a union between Poseidon and Medusa. But the version that later became the most influential, especially through Ovid, tells a much darker story. It says Poseidon forced himself on Medusa inside Athena's temple. It's an uncomfortable story, and it's supposed to be. Ancient myths weren't written to make us comfortable. They were written to explore power, justice, fear, and the complicated relationship between gods and humans. The gods in Greek mythology weren't perfect. In fact, they were often deeply flawed. They loved, they lied, they became jealous, they took revenge. Sometimes they behaved in ways that seem shocking even today. Now, imagine Medusa, a young woman standing inside a sacred temple after something terrible has happened. Who do you think would be punished? The powerful god or the powerless human? You'd probably expect Athena, the goddess of wisdom, to protect her. But that's not what this version of the story says happened. Instead, Athena's anger fell on Medusa. Some interpret the myth as Athena punishing Medusa for desecrating her sacred temple. Others see it as a story about how those without power often suffer the consequences of someone else's actions. Whatever the interpretation, the outcome was the same. Medusa's life changed forever. Her beautiful hair began to twist. One strand, then another, until every lock became a living snake Her face became so terrifying that anyone who looked directly into her eyes turned to stone. Just think about how cruel that curse was. It didn't simply change the way she looked. It made it impossible for anyone to ever look at her again. No conversations, no friendships, no family, no chance to explain. One glance, and everything ended. Overnight, the woman people once admired became the creature everyone feared. People didn't ask what had happened. They didn't ask why. They saw the snakes. They heard the stories. And they decided they already knew who the monster was. So Medusa disappeared from the world, far away from cities, far away from temples, far away from people. She was sent to live in isolation, where anyone foolish enough to approach would never return. And over time, the story spread. Travelers whispered her name. Heroes dreamed of defeating her. Children grew up hearing warnings about the monster with the deadly gaze. Eventually, people forgot there had ever been a woman before the monster. Only the monster remained. As the years passed, the stories became even more frightening. Travelers claimed they had seen statues scattered across the land, men frozen in terror, warriors still holding their swords, hunters who never returned home. According to the legend, they weren't statues at all. They were people, caught by Medusa's gaze. Whether those stories were true or simply grew with every retelling didn't really matter, because fear has a way of making every story bigger. It's interesting, isn't it? Nobody talks about what Medusa thought, only about what everyone else feared. The myths describe heroes who wanted to kill her, kings who wanted proof of her death, adventurers hoping to make a name for themselves. But almost nobody asks what it was like to be the person everyone called a monster. And that's something mythology often does. It tells us what the hero sees, not always what the monster feels. Then, hundreds of miles away, another story was beginning. A young man named Perseus. Unlike Achilles, Perseus wasn't marching into a great war. He wasn't chasing glory. At least, not at first. He was trying to save his mother. Perseus was the son of Zeus and a mortal woman named Danae. His grandfather had once received a prophecy that his own grandson would one day kill him. Terrified, he locked Danae away. But in Greek mythology, prophecies have a habit of finding a way. Zeus visited Danae. Perseus was born, and eventually, grandfather, mother, and child were all swept into a chain of events that none of them could stop. Years later, Perseus found himself standing in the court of King Polydectes. Now, this king wasn't interested in Medusa. Not really. He wanted something else. Perseus's mother. Polydectes wanted to marry Danae, but Perseus kept getting in the way. So the king came up with an impossible challenge. He announced that he wanted gifts from every man in his court. Horses, gold, anything of value. Perseus was young, proud, and had very little to give. Trying to prove himself, he made a promise he couldn't take back. "I'll bring you the head of Medusa." The room fell silent, because everyone knew that wasn't a mission. It was a death sentence. Think about it. How do you kill someone you can't even look at? The moment you see her face, you're finished. No matter how skilled you are, no matter how brave you are, the battle is over before it even begins. According to the myth, the gods themselves stepped in. Athena appeared. So did Hermes. Not to fight the battle for Perseus, but to prepare him for it. Athena gave him a polished shield. Not a weapon, a mirror. Because sometimes the only way to face danger is to avoid looking at it directly. Hermes gave him a curved sword, sharp enough to do what ordinary weapons couldn't. This wasn't just another heroic quest anymore. It had become a mission designed by the gods themselves. Meanwhile, Medusa knew none of this. She wasn't searching for heroes. She wasn't hunting kingdoms. She was simply living the only life left to her. Hidden away, feared by everyone, and completely unaware that someone was already making his way toward her. According to the myth, Perseus first had to find the Gray Eye, 3 mysterious sisters who shared just one eye and one tooth. When one sister needed to see, the others had to wait their turn. It's one of the strangest images in Greek mythology. 3 sisters, passing a single eye between them. Perseus didn't fight them. He waited. And at the exact moment they passed the eye, he grabbed it. Suddenly, all 3 sisters were blind. They begged him to give it back. Perseus agreed, but only after they told him where to find the nymphs who guarded the magical gifts he needed. Winged sandals, a magical bag to carry Medusa's head, and the helmet of Hades, which could make its wearer invisible. It's another reminder that Greek heroes didn't always win through strength. Sometimes they won because they were clever. With the gods' gifts finally in hand, Perseus began the final journey. Winged sandals carried him across mountains and seas. The helmet of Hades made him invisible. Athena's polished shield reflected everything in front of him. And in his hand, he carried the curved blade that would decide the fate of the most famous monster in mythology. Eventually, he reached Medusa's home, far from the world, silent, almost forgotten. Some versions say her 2 sisters, Steno and Euryale, were awake, immortal, watching. Only Medusa could die. Only Medusa was mortal. It's a small detail, but an important one. Even among monsters, she was different. Then Perseus saw them. Not directly, only through the reflection in his shield. That's what Athena had taught him. Never meet Medusa's eyes. Never give the curse a chance. Imagine trying to walk backward through a room using only a mirror. Every step had to be perfect. One mistake would be the last mistake of your life. According to the legend, Medusa was asleep. There was no dramatic duel, no exchange of words, no final warning. Perseus raised the sword, looking only at the reflection, and brought it down. In a single movement, the head of Medusa was severed. And then something extraordinary happened. From Medusa's blood, 2 beings emerged. One was Chrysaor, a giant warrior. The other was Pegasus, the magnificent winged horse. According to the myth, they were the children of Poseidon and Medusa, hidden within her all along, only revealed at the moment of her death. It's one of those moments that only mythology can create. Even in death, something beautiful was born. The moment Medusa died, her immortal sisters awoke. They screamed. The ground shook. They rushed toward the sound. But Perseus had already disappeared. The helmet of Hades concealed him from their sight. He escaped, carrying Medusa's head inside the magical bag. The mission was complete. The impossible had been done. But here's the strange part. Medusa's power didn't die with her. Even after she was gone, her gaze remained. According to the myth, her severed head could still turn anyone who looked at it into stone. The monster was dead. The curse wasn't. On his journey home, Perseus used Medusa's head several times to defeat enemies, to escape danger, to save his own life. The very thing the world had feared became one of the greatest weapons a hero had ever possessed. It's an irony that's hard to ignore. When Medusa was alive, everyone wanted to destroy her. After she died, everyone wanted to use her power. Eventually, Perseus returned to King Polydectes, the king who had sent him on what was supposed to be an impossible mission. Polydectes laughed. He didn't believe Perseus had succeeded until Perseus quietly reached into the bag, lifted Medusa's head, and held it before the king. In an instant, the laughter stopped. The king and those standing beside him were turned to stone. The mission that had been meant to kill Perseus had instead destroyed the man who created it. Afterward, Perseus gave Medusa's head to Athena. And this is where the story takes one final unexpected turn. Instead of hiding it away, Athena placed Medusa's head on her shield, the Aegis. From that moment on, the face that once terrified anyone who looked at it became a symbol of protection. At first, that sounds strange. Why would people wear the face of a monster to keep themselves safe? But the ancient Greeks believed frightening images could drive away evil. If something looked terrifying enough, perhaps even evil spirits would stay away. They even had a name for it: the Gorgoneon, the image of Medusa's face. You could find it everywhere. On shields, on temple walls, on armor, on coins. People carved her face into buildings, painted it onto pottery, and carried it into battle. It's one of history's great ironies. The woman everyone feared became the face people trusted to protect them. And then the centuries passed. The Greek world became the Roman world. The Roman world faded. Empires rose. Empires fell. But Medusa never disappeared. Every generation seemed to rediscover her, and every generation told her story a little differently. To some ancient writers, Medusa was simply a monster, a terrifying obstacle for a hero to overcome, nothing more. But later writers, especially Ovid, told a more tragic story. A story that asked readers to wonder what happened before the monster appeared. That version changed everything. Suddenly, people weren't just afraid of Medusa. Some began to feel sorry for her. That's why you'll find so many different interpretations of Medusa today. In art, she has been painted as a terrifying creature, and also as a grieving woman. In literature, she has appeared as both villain and victim. Some modern readers see her story as a warning about power. Others see it as a story about injustice. Still others simply see a great myth, one that has evolved with every generation that retold it. Maybe that's the real difference between history and mythology. History asks, what happened? Mythology often asks, what does this story mean? The answer isn't always the same, and perhaps it was never supposed to be. Whether you see Medusa as a monster, a victim, or something far more complicated, one thing is difficult to deny. Very few characters from the ancient world are still instantly recognizable thousands of years later. A single image, a woman with snakes for hair, is enough for almost anyone to know exactly who you're talking about. That's extraordinary. Not because it proves the story happened, but because it proves the story endured. Her name was Medusa, the monster who wasn't born a monster.
The Story Vault. Unlock the Untold.